Welcome to Jack's Corner, where conservative values meet national headlines, and truth and reality have a seat at the table. From Louisville, Kentucky, here's your host, Jack Richardson.
Well, folks, welcome back to another edition of Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. And it's another rich news week, and I want to get into some of the top stories that have occurred over the last week, maybe 10 days. And let's start off with New Orleans and the terrorist attack down there. Now, that seems like ages ago, doesn't it? But that was in the less than 2 weeks ago. And that's amazing how much water has gone over the dam in just the last few days. But we've gone from that to the fires in LA, and then the sentencing of Trump. And every day it just seems to be something new. And the news is just saturated with it. And I know you got tired of hearing about the terrorist attack down in New Orleans because that's all you had 24/7. The same with the fires in California, and now with the sentencing of Trump. What will be next? Well, let's deal with New Orleans first. And I wrote an article that's in was just listed and published in Bluegrass Chronicles, and you might want to look it up. But I start out with, what religion do the recent terrorist attacks in New Orleans have in common with? First hint, it's not Protestantism, it's not Catholicism, it's not Hinduism or Buddhism, it's not Judaism. That's your first hint. Here's your second hint. If you fly, you have to go through metal detectors, you have to take your shoes off, your belt off, your coat off. You have to put your laptop in a separate bin. You have all these inconveniences, not only with your travel, but you have the inconveniences when you're in a big crowd or, say, going to a concert. Well, here's your last hint. The last hint is President Bush said that this was a peaceful religion. Well, he was either a liar or he was stupid or maybe both. But if you guessed Islam, you'd be correct. And it's time to be honest about it. It's time to be truthful about it, because speaking the truth about this and holding that faith and those who practice it accountable. It's time for some accountability, because you're not going to stop this until you start facing the fact that this is not what you have been gaslit to believe, that it's a peaceful religion. It's time to stop the toxic toleration that I speak about in my book, American Systemic Psychosis. This is toxically tolerant. Just do some deductive reasoning. Think about it. Connect the dots. All the inconveniences, all the terror, all the carnage and everything is from this religion. It's not from any of the others. But yet, here, the president that I supported, of course, I didn't have much of a choice because of what was on the other side, what the Democrats were proposing and putting up as a candidate. But Bush was absolutely wrong. It is not a peaceful religion, but you're being gaslit there because they thought that you could make the whole world democratic. Well, there are just some cultures that are not going to adhere to democracy. And besides, you don't want democracy anyway, because it always tends towards tyranny, because you have the least capable people of exercising a responsible voting. And they vote in the worst people. They vote in their tyranny again. You have to have a moral basis for democracy to work. And what you really want is a republic. But I'm getting off track there. Let's get back to what happened in New Orleans. And it was this one guy, yes, American grown, but he had been radicalized by Islamists. And so he ran a truck, as you know, down Bourbon Street and killed 15 people. That's just atrocious, but that's the kind of mindset, that's what these people, particularly over in the Middle East, are taught from the age of 2 on. They're taught to hate the Jews, to kill the Jews. It's an honorable thing to kill an infidel. And what is an infidel? An infidel is somebody that doesn't believe in the Islamic faith, or if you can call it a faith. So anyway, I confronted him and got nowhere in Hyde Park in that particular debate. But, Christianity preceded Islam about 700 years before Islam came about. And Islam spread because back then it was rape, pillage, and plunder. And what they would do is that they would divide the spoils up amongst the people that were doing the raiding. So that's how it advanced, but they tried to adhere it and hook it to a faith. And I won't get into all the details of that and the things that I debated in Hyde Park over in London back at that time. But I have represented Muslims. There's a lot of peaceful, peace-loving Muslims. They just simply don't know their faith, or they're basically too intimidated to question it. It's something that they were brought up in, and all their support group and family and everything are in it. And I've met too many of them that are intimidated or afraid to leave the faith because they're going to lose everything they've got. But there was one fellow that was absolutely great. He became very famous, Nabil Qureshi, who wrote the book Seeking Allah and Finding Jesus. And he was a devout Muslim who encountered Christianity. And one of the most fabulous people I've ever seen. I've watched his not only podcasts, but his lectures. He was so steeped in the scripture. He had such a vast knowledge, and it brought tears to my eyes when he died. He died very, very young. I think he was in his late 30s, maybe. And but he wrote this bestseller, and I would recommend it. But he gave one of the most cogent explanations for the Trinity that I've ever heard. But this is a fellow who basically delved into his Islamic faith, found that it was untenable, and then he started searching through Christianity and became a Christian and had such a vast knowledge of Scripture. But to get back to the terrorist attacks in New Orleans, folks, this is a disease. It's a disease of the lie. And you can't prove a lie, and you can't cure a disease with a lie. When you go to the doctor, the first thing you do is you tell him the truth because you want to get well. Well, if you don't tell him the truth and you tell him a lie, you're not going to get well. You're not going to recover. So the only way that we're going to rid ourselves of terrorism is start holding that faith accountable for the things that's being done in the name of that faith. And 15 people are dead today because of this radicalism. And with Biden having flooded millions of people over our border, we have no clue how many more terrorists are in here. We're not going to cure this terrorism problem until we start facing the truth and start holding this faith accountable for all the atrocities that are going on. It's not a peaceful religion, and there is no such thing as peaceful coexistence with that religion. Get used to it. Now, the next item I want to get to, news item that I want to get to, is the California fires. Well, let me start off with this. Depravity in a depraved mind is a non-functioning mind. Well, why do I start off with that? Well, a non-functioning mind is exactly what put a lot of these people in office who are responsible for these fires, or the way that these fires have been handled. You know, every year California has fires. That's no secret. Christmas comes the 25th of December every year. It's no surprise. I know when in some of my cases, when we'd go in on an emergency basis, that a couple were having a fight over who gets the kids at Christmas, and the judge would look at the people and they'd say, the judge would tell the people, this is no emergency. You knew that Christmas was coming for the last 365 days. So I'm not going to hear your case. Getting back to what's going on with the fires in California, they happen every year. It's no big surprise. So why didn't you plan for it? Well, you didn't plan for it because of the people that you put in office. So the problem out in California is not the fire. It's the elected officials, and it's the people who voted for those elected officials. It's liberalism. Liberalism has a consequence because it's psychotic and it's detached from reality. It's detached from the truth. So what do we have out in California right now? Well, basically we had the top three positions as far as the LA Fire Department, which is, particularly in certain professions, it's male dominated for a good reason. But the top three positions went to lesbians. Imagine that. The top three positions in California went to lesbians. Seriously? Are you that woke that you put people like that into positions that were not competent? You only put them in those positions so that you could feel good about yourself, so that you could have some super pious or sanctimonious feeling about yourself that you had done something that was so woke, so broke, so DEI. Think about this. DEI is collapsing all around the country, and corporations are dropping it because not only is it radically wrong, radically racist, radically perverse, but it's very, very costly. It does not work. It did not accomplish what they said that it would, because it wasn't intended for that anyway. But do you want a DEI surgeon operating on you? Well, good luck on recovery. Do you want a DEI pilot flying you at 37,000 feet at 550 miles an hour across the country? Well, good luck on getting to your destination. Well, do you want DEI picks controlling your fire department and making policies for your fire department in a fire-prone area? Well, if you do, your house is going to burn down. Oh, guess what? They did, all over Southern California. And this is absolutely a disaster. Now, I am sympathetic for those people who didn't vote for these people in there, who lost their homes. I'm sympathetic to the people who have lost family members, pets, everything that they owned. But you know what? Decisions have consequences. And they decided to vote for the most incompetent. They didn't vote on the basis of competence. They voted on either immutable characteristics, or they voted because of orientation or some perverse reason that they put people in the office, not because of competence. And so this is the consequence of placing these types of people in office. They were totally unprepared. You had dry reservoirs when they normally get seasons of heavy rain, when they could have captured all this water instead of letting it all go out to the Pacific Ocean. There's just one thing after another. Gavin Newsom, that woke, far-left Marxist governor, cut $100 million out of the fire budget. Are you serious? And he got reelected. They voted Mayor Bass in there, and she takes a trip to Africa for the inauguration of a president that she doesn't know or have any contact with. This is what you get with liberals. They are absolutely detached from reality, and if you keep voting for people like that, then you're detached from reality. So, to some extent, Californians got what they deserved. They got what they voted for. And that's a hard thing to say, but just think about it. It's like the Bible says, a dog goes back to its vomit. Well, these people keep going back to the same failed policies, the same failed politics of the past, and look what happened. Now this is really bad for the rest of us. The rest of us don't get off from this. What's going to happen? Well, $150 billion worth of claims is going to be made against insurance companies. Guess what? Your insurance premiums on your house are going to go up. Those in Missouri, Kentucky, Ohio, Alabama, I don't care where you live in this country, your ability to afford a home is going to really be stretched to the max. You're not going to be able to afford a home soon with things that like what went on out in California, because the insurance premiums are increasing all across the nation. And with this disaster out in California, yes, your insurance premiums on your homeowners' policies are going to go up. And like in Florida, they've gone up triple, and they will continue to go up out in California. And this is, I think, one of the biggest disasters of all. Think about that, $150 billion in insurance claims. And you don't think that that's not going to affect your insurance premiums? Well, it already is, and you're paying for it now. But we need common sense. What about the climate change? Yeah, they want to blame it on climate change. No, not when the reservoirs are dry, when they could have been full. not when the fire hydrants were empty, when they could have been full. The environmentalists, this is how wacko they are. They won't let you put fire breaks out there. They won't let you clear the debris around your house because of some little mouse. They are tearing down dams and reservoirs because of some little fish. And what's happening? People are dying. Right now, I think 24 people have already lost their lives, $150 billion in property damage. It's absolutely astounding. And somebody has to be held accountable, and that is going to be maybe your neighbor who is constantly voting for these people in office. So you've got to get the left out of the government. You got to get these leftists out of the media. You need to start confronting. So this is not just a war of politicians getting up on a stage and debating anymore. This is a matter of you having a discussion with your neighbor and your family members and showing them and trying to bring to them some kind of cognitive reasoning, some kind of deductive reasoning with regards to tying the consequence of their vote. And if you don't do that, then you're part of the problem too. You just can't stay quiet any longer. There's going to have to be some accountability. I love what Proverbs says. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? And that's what we have. We have a bunch of simple-minded people continuing to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And it's not going to happen. And you're going to pay for it. And pretty soon, no one's going to be able to afford a home. So that was long-winded on that. Let me get to the corruption in New York and the corrupt Judge Juan Merchan in New York that just sentenced Trump. Imagine that. Let me start with this thought. So Trump is now a felon. That basically cheapens the impact and the meaning of felon, doesn't it? Because now we've made him a felon. And do you know that a felon can't own a gun, can't own a bullet? Well, guess what? He now has control of an army and millions and billions of guns and bullets. And on top of that, he also has a nuclear arsenal. Now, how incongruent is that? Think about it. How incongruent is that you make him a felon and now he's president? And that's how radically left, that's how psychotic the left is. They are so hateful. These people, you can't imagine the rage and the resentment that these people have. And they are in power. I've talked a lot about how we've got to reform the judicial system and the legal system in this country. Well, when it comes to judges like Merchan, this is the guy that should be sentenced to jail. Because as an attorney of over 40 years, I can tell you that not only it wasn't mistakes, these were intentional violations of evidentiary law. There are so many counts of reversible error that this man did. It shows an unbelievable bias and a breach of judicial temperament that this guy should not only be disbarred, he should spend time in jail because this was fraud. This was corruption at the highest levels. And he has damaged and brought into disrepute the legal system and the judicial system. And there's no reason why any appellate judge within the New York system shouldn't have stepped in and said, stop right now. But so Merchan had no choice at this point, particularly on the heels of the Supreme Court decision with regards to presidential immunity, to sentence Trump, but with no penalty. He discharged basically a case that should have never been brought in the first place. When you take a look at Attorney General Letitia James in New York, this woman told you about her bias before she was even elected. She ran on the promise that she would go after Trump before there was any evidence of any crime whatsoever. And that should have disqualified her right there. But then, of course, the crazy people, the liberals, the leftists, the biased of the left, the liberals in New York, voted her into office. And this is the kind of thing that you get. She should have never been allowed. She should have been immediately disqualified for running on that basis, to go get somebody before there's even a crime. And guess what? Merchan sentenced him, and he basically told the jury before they even rendered a judgment, he wrote the instructions in such a way that they couldn't do anything but find guilt. Now, that is absolutely horrendously wrong. And the reason he did that is because they couldn't define a crime. Nobody has today been able to tell you what the crime was that Trump committed. And the reason why is because there was no crime. It was all about get you. They were going to get him. They were going to try to do everything they could to keep him out of the White House, and they failed because the American people saw what was going on. They saw the corruption. Now this felony and this felon, that's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to call him a felon. And why? Because the simple-minded people out there are affected by that. They know how to manipulate the simple-minded person. And I've heard and seen on the internet and on some of the podcasts, well, he's a felon. He's a felon. No, that shows your stupidity because you don't know the law. You don't know the fact that they didn't have a crime. They can't name a crime. And the people that say that he's a felon, they can't even name the crime either. And this was all political. Don't ever forget this. Every Democrat was behind the fraud and the lawfare behind Trump. But thank God that Trump had a strong enough character to fight, and he was fighting for us. And we need to be thankful for that. But corruption needs to be put behind bars, and we can start with Letitia James and Alvin Bragg and Juan Merchan in New York. Now let's talk about the Panama Canal again. Jimmy Carter gave it away for $1. He dishonored 38,000 Americans who died building that canal. I am not going to honor Jimmy Carter, and I'm not going to say rest in peace for him because he is so dishonored in this nation. If you knew your history and you knew what went on back during his presidency, you would not honor him either. Remember this. Jimmy Carter was the worst president in history until Biden, and now Biden has that title. So what's so important about Panama Canal? Well, when it was given away, there was a treaty that said that it had to remain neutral. Well, guess what? China owns property on both sides of the canal. They also have lease interests in ports, the ports in Panama, putting them even that much closer to the United States. Instead of 7,000 miles away, they're right on our doorstep. So when you hear President Trump talk about Panama Canal, you better start looking into it. This is not a joke. This is very serious because this is major for our military and it's major for our shipping concerns to get through that Panama Canal. The Chinese are basically in control of it now. Can you imagine? How could that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happened. It happened under Democrat administration. The Democrats did it, and they're unrepentant about it, and they don't care. They're ignoring the danger that is on our southern flank. This is what you get with Democrats and the left that has taken over the Democrat Party. One last thing I want to address here, and almost everything that I've talked about today is, you could say, is the woke of the week. But the next thing is with regard to Biden pretends to award the Pope a Presidential Medal of Freedom. So what went on 10 days before Trump's inauguration by Biden making this unusual trip to Italy to meet with the Pope? Well, first of all, it was a free trip on Air Force One. The real reason, I think, was to get absolution for his life of corruption and lies. And here Biden was saying in a news conference the other day, he says the most important thing in life is the truth. Well, he's been the biggest prevaricator I've ever seen, the biggest prevaricator that's ever been in the White House. Everybody in the Senate in his 50 years in Washington, D.C. knows him to be a pathological liar. He's never been able to tell the truth. And so he goes over there under the pretense of giving the Pope the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Well, that medal doesn't mean anything anymore because he gave it to Hillary Clinton and to Liz Cheney. He has really cheapened it. But he had to have some kind of pretext for going over there to see the Pope just 10 days before the end of his term, and that was for a free trip and to get absolution from a Marxist Pope that's not going to be able to give him any kind of absolution. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say with regards to this recent trip over to Italy and to the Pope. Biden has supported everything that God hates, and I don't think his trip to the Pope is going to do him any good. So with that, I don't mean to end on such a hot and heated note like that, but those are the really top stories of the last 10 days. Hope everybody either gets out of the deep freeze that we have in the east and the south, and I hope that there's a quick end to the fires in California. And until next week, we'll see you later.